In my last video, which you can check out by clicking the link on the screen now, I painted and based a Stormcast army in just a couple of days, and whilst overall I'm really happy with how they've turned out, especially with how quick and easy they were to do, I think I can do something a bit more exciting with the bases to make them stand out from the crowd, and I'm going to show you how. I'm Benji, and welcome to Benji's Hobbies. As I said in the intro, I want to rebase my entire bronze Stormcast army with something a little bit more unique and a little bit different than what I would normally use. With the paint scheme being so incredibly simple, I'm hoping that these new bases will make them definitely stand out a little bit more and just give them a little bit more character and flavour. In my head, I can imagine this army defending an ancient castle or some long forgotten dungeon, so I'm imagining a stone courtyard or castle walls, with very well worn, weathered and possibly slightly damaged cobbles. I'm going to use these MDF laser cut bases as my templates. I picked these up pretty cheap off eBay, and provided you know the size of the base you're after, they're pretty easy to find. Who doesn't love the smell of laser cut MDF in the morning? I'm going to make the cobbles out of XPS, or expanded polystyrene. I love this stuff as it's easy to cut, great for carving and holds texture really well. It goes by various different brand names across the world, but the one I'm using is sold as underfloor insulation by a company called Cozy Space, who I found on eBay. It may not be the cheapest way to buy it, but they come in manageable 2-foot by 2-foot sheets, which are great size for model making and a convenient size for storage if you're limited on space like me. I'm going to cut the XPS into small bricks using my hot wire cutter. You can easily use a sharp craft knife to do this, but as I already own a hot wire cutter, I may as well get some use out of it, and it is a good bit quicker than cutting them all by hand. I'm cutting the bricks into roughly the same footprint size, but I'm altering the thickness by a fraction of a millimetre each time I run the foam through the cutter. By doing this, I can add some variation in height to the cobbles when I start laying them down to give me a more textured look. I'm not cutting the cobbles to an exact size, and in all honesty, I just eyeballed it until I had them at what looked like the right scale. If you want the exact measurements to follow along, these are roughly 12mm long, 3mm wide and around 2mm deep. Now this is one thing I cannot stress enough. You need to make more bricks than you think you're going to use. Even with these small bases, I used a load of bricks, so don't underestimate how many you need. Once you've got all your bricks cut, you'll notice that all the edges are very straight and angular, so you want to weather these to round off the edges. Now you could do this individually with a nail file on every single brick, but you'll find that this will take forever to get it done, so the easy option is to make your own tumbler. Simply use an old coffee tin or other suitable container and add some rough textured pebbles, stones and other coarse grit. You then throw in your bricks and simply give the tin a really good shake. The coarse texture of the stones inside will weather the edges of the softer bricks. For a more rounded, worn effect, simply shake the container for longer. I'd advise doing this in smaller batches as it tends to be a little bit quicker, and you can keep an eye on how rounded the edges are, and it's easy to separate the stones from the bricks when you come to separate them. I use Mod Podge to glue the bricks down, applying a decent covering with an old brush. I started off experimenting on the 40mm bases. These would be used for the bulk of my army, such as all the sequitors and judicators. I then start laying the bricks out over the base in a way that looks good. I'm not too worried about the bricks overlapping the edges at this point, as I'll be cutting away the excess later on. To help lay the bricks and to stop my fat fingers from moving bricks I've already attached, I'm using a set of tweezers to help place them. The Mod Podge stays pretty tacky for a while, so you can always remove or slide any bricks if you're not happy with their placement. Once you're happy with the brick layout, you just leave it to one side to dry and move on to the next one until you've got them all done. I wanted some bases to be a little more built up to add some extra height to the models and make some of the characters and elite warriors, such as the evocators, stand out on the tabletop. For this, I simply glued an extra layer of XPS foam to the MDF bases using Gorilla Glue and built up steps around them using my bricks. This worked really well, especially on some of the larger bases. I must admit, I'm really liking the way they're looking so far, and if it was for a display army, I'd be tempted to leave some of them with overhanging bricks. But as these are going to be played with, they need to be cut down to the correct base size. Now this is where the hot wire cutter really comes into its own. I could slide the edge of the base up to the hot wire and simply rotate the base all the way around so that all the foam is cut flush with the MDF base underneath. This would have been far more difficult to do with one of the normal Citadel bases, as the edge tapers inwards, which would leave a small gap between your foam and the top of the plastic base. If you don't have a hot wire cutter, you can still cut away the excess with a knife, but you'll have to make sure that it's done carefully so you don't cut away too much of your foam or damage the bricks on top. The only time that this has proved to be a challenge was when I cut the layer of Gorilla Glue that glued the layers of XPS in place. As this glue slightly expands, it creates a dense foam which can be cut with a hot wire cutter, but it takes a little bit longer to melt through than the normal blue XPS foam. Any small gaps or melted XPS can be filled with some fine filler, and once this is dry, it can be given a light sanding to give a nice, smooth, clean edge. I'm adding a bit of extra damage, cracks and texture to some of the cobbles to make them look even more worn. To do this, I'm using some crumpled up tinfoil and pushing it into the foam. It's best to work at this gently and in small patches until you know how much pressure to apply. With the last bits of texture added in, they're pretty much good to go. Now you could simply prime, paint, varnish and attach your models to these, but I'm planning on making some silicone moulds out of these masters, so I'll be able to cast as many as I need in the future, which will save you some considerable time rather than hand making each one. The resin I'll be using to cast these will also be significantly more durable than the XPS foam, which I expect would become damaged as they get played with. If you want to find out how I go about making the mould and how to cast your own bases, make sure you subscribe to the channel, as I'll have a video on this process coming out very soon. As always, thanks for watching guys. I hope this video has inspired you to make your own cobblestone bases for Age of Sigmar or for Dungeons & Dragons or for any other games that might have fantasy style bases. If you want to support the channel, make sure you go and check out the links in the description below. I've got a link to my Element Games affiliate account down there. If you click that link and buy any of your toys or hobby supplies from Element Games, the guys there give me a little kickback as a thank you for sending them away, and it just really helps with what I'm intending to do in here. Thanks again for watching guys, stay safe and I will see you in the next video.